You're running away from the man the Most High made you to be. The hardest thing that we could do as men, especially men of faith, is accept who the Most High made you to be, who God made you to be. This is something that I recently came to terms with because honestly, guys, there's no prerequisite of being a man in this life besides being able to provide for yourself, provide for your family, your own family. I'm not talking about like your parents and your siblings, if you have your own family. There's really no prerequisites in life of doing anything but to accept who the Most High made you to be with all your imperfections and your flaws, especially if you're a man of faith. A lot of us that are men of faith, I've openly called myself a man of the Lord on this channel. There's always a sense of perfectionism where we feel like we have to live up to, Christ's standard, Yahweh Shai's standard for y'all that know the name of the Messiah. We feel like we have to live up to his standard, and it's impossible. Even the scriptures themselves in James, it tells you that we have, patience worketh faith, that we may be perfect and entire. And I'm paraphrasing here, but perfect doesn't mean meet an unmeasurable standard where you don't fall short, where you don't fail, where you don't miss the mark. It means being able to be whole, being able to accept who you are, because every flaw that the Most High gave us, it made us into the men that we are today. And if you're someone like me who came from a immigrant background, Mexican background, you know how performative the church is. And this is going to be a video topic that I will do in near future, but you know how it is growing up in religion. You know how it is to grow up and your parents don't really, teach you the right things when it comes to actually reading the scriptures. They teach you things like money is evil, success is evil, power is evil. Having a life of abundance is evil. You also go through different generational traumas that you carry as yourself as a man. A survival mode that you inherited from your parents. I know I did from my father. My father didn't grow up the best, and whether he knows it or not, he passed that on to me. Because now every time I take a break, every time, or I used to take a break, take a rest, I felt like I was failing my entire bloodline. And to go back to the faith aspect, it's almost like you don't ever live up to who the Most High made you to be. You bury away your talents. If you guys know the parable of the talents in the scriptures, the talent, the servant who hid his one talent and said to the Lord, like, I was too scared to actually use it because I was afraid of what you were gonna do to me. Our own perfections get in the way. Our own our own sorry our own standards get in the way. Perfectionism gets in the way. And that's something that I had dealt with for a long time. I had a huge inner critic, and I still do, but I need that voice to galvanize me, to push me to be exactly the man the Most High made me to be, intended for me to be. Because that voice that has those high standards, it keeps me edgy. It keeps my edge. But see, I'm no longer performing. You see, there's a battle that men in the faith don't talk about. The scriptures uses the verbiage of the old man and the new man, so that's exactly what I use. The battle between the old man and the new man, the man that you want to be, the man that you were made to be, and the old man, the man that you don't want to be no more, it really comes down to the ability to accept him. If you can accept who you are with all your traumas, with all your wounds, and understand that the Most High didn't allow those things to happen to you, but to happen for you, your life will change forever. Because now there will never be a question of why did this happen to me and why does the Most High hate me and I don't understand, Lord, why this has to happen to me. Things don't happen to us. If you really believe in the Most High, you believe in God the way you say you do, things do not happen to us, they happen for us. And persuading sorry, that's per Romans chapter 8 verse 28. Same thing with James 1 and 4. And I don't really talk too much about my doctrine or anything like that on this channel, and this channel won't be for that, where I go into different doctrines, but I'm bringing out a really relatable case here where I'm sure many men of faith have felt this before. Where every time you fall short, you begin to condemn yourself and you make it worse. You sin, you fall into lust, you fall into temptation. Really, we choose it. We choose it because the Most High doesn't allow us to be tempted than more than we could handle. That's scriptural also. He doesn't tempt us. Don't say the Most High tempts us, because he doesn't. We choose our lust. We choose to fall into sin. We choose. But then we'll ask the Most High, why did you allow this to happen to us? Then we feel sorry for ourselves. Like not understanding that we chose. Then we go into these cycles where we don't feel good enough for him no more, where it's like you condemn yourself. See, I'm not worthy. Why even ask for forgiveness? Let me just hide from the Lord. Like he ain't gonna be able to see me. Adam did the same thing. Adam and Eve literally did the same thing. They condemned themselves, not realizing had they just been upfront with the Most High, he most likely would have forgiven them. Now, would he still judge them? That's neither here nor there. I'm not sure. I'm not the Lord. But a lot of us, we ask for forgiveness. We ask for acceptance from the Lord, but we don't accept ourselves. We don't forgive ourselves. So some of you guys may be praying and you're doubting. And you pretend like you're not doubting. And you're saying to the Most High, like, why can't I just believe? Well, because you're doubting. You don't really believe in whatever it is that you're praying for. The scripture is very plain. Ask and you shall receive. The problem is, most of the time, we don't feel like we deserve to receive. You know why? Because receiving requires you to accept that you're already good enough. And if you're a man who's been performing all his life, like most men have, we don't feel like we're good enough. I used to be in that boat. I relate to the struggle. I would grind. I was very diligent, like the scripture says. But you know what? It doesn't matter how diligent I am, how disciplined I am. If I don't believe, if my faith is wavering, I'm like the sea tossed to and fro. Also referring to James. And then I would ask myself, why is my prayers not being answered? Because my heart wasn't even opened to receiving. We talk about closed doors, like cutting off and closing doors, to allow new blessings in, to allow new doors to open up. Well, you can't even open the door if your heart's not even in the place to receive it, which is why the scripture talks about, people's hearts being hardened. We don't believe we deserve it. That's really the root of most issues. We as men do not believe we deserve whatever it is we're asking. So we try to outwork it and become ready or become qualified enough to receive it. When really there's no prerequisite. There's no prerequisite for accepting who you are. Because when you accept who you are, everything in your life that you get becomes a byproduct of who you are. You have certain things because of who you are. This is not like how like how society is today, where you got to earn shit and then you become and then you earn. You know why? Because when you just are, you do that stuff because that's who you are. You don't work hard just to get money. Yeah, of course. That's a big part of the reason, but you should be a man who works hard because that's who he is. And by a byproduct, then you're going to get money, then you're going to get recognition, then you're going to get whatever is that you're looking for from whatever output you're putting out. But you're not going to be fucking burning out, because that is who you are. That is your identity. That is your identity. You're a man who does that. And that's the problem. Even in the faith, even with men in the faith, that they perform faith. How can you perform faith? Faithful is a byproduct of being a son of God. The scripture speaks about the spirit of bondage, right? Well, the spirit of bondage really is imposter syndrome, if you really think about it, because it keeps you bonded to the old man. It keeps you bonded in vices, temptations, lust that you don't want to be stuck in. But why does it, Like if you feel like following God is like, you know, heavy, it's because you're performing faith. You're not actually faithful. You're just saying you are. And then you talk about God, and a part of you does believe in God, but the other part of you doesn't believe in God. And most oftentimes than not, that's because you're resentful towards God. You're asking questions, why, Lord, why is this happening to me? Why, why is this going on? And you're complaining. And then you pray, and then you expect something from the Most High. Like he ain't know you complain. He ain't know that you're suppressing all your emotions, that you're running away from who he made you to be. See, you look at yourself with the view of self-hate, not realizing the Most High is a God of love. What is love? The ability to tell someone else the truth about who they are. But can a man really receive the truth about who he is if he's not truthful with himself? He can't. He can't. We're not perfect, y'all. We're not perfect. There's no standard where we hit every day where it's like, oh, we're perfect now. We're good enough now. It doesn't exist. A lot of men, they get stuck on, these platforms, and they ask themselves like, why am I still stuck in life? Why am I still XYZ? Well, because you don't believe you deserve it. So you end up stuck in the same circle over and over and over again, not realizing, really not being blessed enough to receive that you've been good enough this whole time, but you're still chasing your worth rather than accepting and embodying who you are. Because when you finally do that, when you accept who you are, when you accept the man the Most High made you to be, nothing is performative. It's authentic. And you know what authenticity brings? Real results. Real results. It keeps you detached. It keeps you abundant. Why? Because you know you could get it. You know you could receive it. But see, the way the Lord rewards us is believe first and then receive. If you believe, you receive. But if you're waiting to receive and then believe, it's never gonna happen, y'all. But it always starts with, can you receive yourself? Can you receive the man the Most High made you to be? A lot of us have been traumatized. A lot of us deal with generational curses. Those things are true. But the way you view it is the way you view yourself. If you look at those generational curses that have been placed on you, and you say to yourself, "Oh, well, why did this have to happen to me?" And well, that's the way you view yourself. Why do I have to be who I am? You see, the way I grew up, I'm not speaking in my perspective. I'm talking about in generality how some men think. Well, what the way I grew up, I don't believe I deserve anything good. That's how a lot of guys really think, whether they say it or not, or they say it or not. It's the underlying tone between their prayers and their complaints and their requests. I don't really believe I deserve the life the Most High. I don't really believe I deserve whatever it is I'm asking for. So why would the Most High give it to you? The hardest thing about walking as a man of the Lord is having faith unwavering. And when you perform faith all your life, when your faith is not really tested, when your convictions have been borrowed from other men, what happens? You get exposed when the furnace of adversity comes, when the fire comes, when the Most High tests you, you're exposed. You're exposed. And then you go back to your old cycles, the old man, you know. This video was very heavy because there's a lot of concepts in this video. And, this is something that I've been dealing with myself, for a long time. For a long time. And the body reveals that, okay? When I was in my lowest estate, because I know how to be abound and abased. When I was in my most abased estate, my body reflected that. I was fat. What does that mean? I was carrying weight I shouldn't have. I was carrying things spiritually in my soul, beliefs of negativity that I shouldn't have, beliefs of doubt, beliefs of unfaithfulness that I shouldn't have. I was carrying, a lack of self-expression because my chest would cave in. I was hunchback. Why? Because I lost the ability to express myself authentically as a man. I would deal with shoulder pain, extreme shoulder pain. because from the constant tension that I was living with the environments that I was placing myself in. So I walk around like this, shrugged up. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? It means I don't know how to rest. And that's exactly the patterns that would show up in my life. I didn't never know how to turn it off. The only reason you shrug your neck is because you feel suffocated. That is a reflection of your soul. That is a reflection that you're not really walking in the man the Most High made you to be. You know why? Because when you follow the Lord, wherever the Lord is, there is liberty, the spirit of liberty. Most men, they don't want confidence. Confidence is the ability to trust a skill. Fuck all that. I want liberty. I want to be able to be myself wherever I want, and I've reached that. And I say all praises to the Most High for that. But really, when you walk into the man that the Most High made you to be, you have to accept the man that you used to be. Yes, the man that would watch porn, the man that would fall into temptation, the man who would probably sleep with a bunch of women. I was that guy. I want to sleep with a bunch of women, but I was a fucking player. I had to let that go and let me not pretend like there's still not fucking temptations that I have to go against. And I work, I do my best not to choose them. You know what I mean? Like I do my best not to choose them, but in this life, when you follow God and you believe you are a God, because as the scripture says, ye are gods, Psalm 82 and 6, because you follow God, that's what being a son of God is. You have power. But see, if you perform faith, you don't think you have power. You don't think you have the Most High. That's the reality. That's the reality of it. You know, the hardest thing to do is actually embody who the Most High made you to be, to actually live out that vision, to actually walk in that power. That is the hardest thing to do. That is the hardest thing to accept, because when you accept it, you realize your entire life has been programmed by society to make you chase your worth rather than realize I've always been worthy. Now it's just time I accept it and walk into who I'm meant to be.